Hello, my name is Alexis, and I am 33 years old. I have recently emerged from one of the most harrowing and transformative experiences of my life. My story is not an easy one to tell, but I share it in the hopes that others might find strength in my journey. This chapter of my life begins with my former husband, Russell, and his mother, Lori, a woman who would cast a long shadow over our relationship from the very beginning. Russell and I first met in college, and our connection was instant. It felt as though we had known each other forever, and before long, our relationship blossomed into something deep and meaningful. We spent nearly 5.5 years together before finally tying the knot. I believed our bond was unbreakable, forged by love and mutual respect. Yet, despite our happiness, there was always a looming presence, Lori, my mother-in-law, who made it clear from day one that she did not approve of me. From the moment Russell introduced us, Lori found every opportunity to belittle me. Whether it was a comment about my appearance, my aspirations, or even the way I spoke, her disapproval was relentless. I had always struggled with insecurities about my looks, and Lori seemed to sense that, using it as ammunition against me at every turn. Yet, I found solace in Russell's love, believing that he saw and cherished me for who I truly was. That belief kept me strong, even when Lori's insults cut deeper than I cared to admit. 3 years into our marriage, I made a bold decision to leave my job and start a business with my best friend. It was a leap of faith, but Russell supported me wholeheartedly. The business had a slow start, but with perseverance and dedication, it grew into something remarkable. Before long, we were turning a substantial profit, allowing us to live comfortably. Despite my success, Lori remained unimpressed. She dismissed my achievements and accused me of trying to overshadow her son. No matter how hard I worked or how much I accomplished, in her eyes, I was never enough. As time went on, the tension between us only deepened. Russell's silence in the face of his mother's constant verbal attacks created a rift between us. I needed him to defend me, to stand up for our marriage, but he never did. The resentment between us grew, leading to more frequent arguments. Then, one day, I discovered something that shattered me completely. Scrolling through Russell's phone, I stumbled upon a string of text messages between him and his mother. My heart pounded as I read Lori's words, urging her son to consider other women she deemed more suitable for him. My stomach turned as I saw their cruel conversations, filled with harsh words about me. What hurt the most was that, at first, Russell had resisted her schemes, but over time, his responses had changed. I saw his growing interest in the women she pushed toward him. My world crumbled beneath me. Devastated, I knew I had to confront Russell. I planned to have the difficult conversation after work the next day, but fate had other plans. That morning, as I was on my way to work, everything changed in an instant. One moment, I was driving, and the next, darkness swallowed me whole. When I awoke, I was surrounded by beeping machines and sterile white walls. A sharp pain throbbed in my head, and my throat felt unbearably dry. As I struggled to take in my surroundings, panic set in. I was in a hospital. My body ached, but it wasn't until I tried to move my legs that a new kind of terror gripped me. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't feel them. A wave of fear crashed over me. I called for a nurse, my voice shaky and urgent. She quickly summoned a doctor, who began running tests, assessing the sensation in my legs. The air in the room felt thick with tension. Then Russell walked in. His face was a mask of concern, his eyes darting between me and the doctor. But before I could say anything to him, the doctor delivered the devastating news. I was paralyzed. The room spun. My mind raced to process the words, but they felt unreal. Paralysis. It couldn't be true. This had to be some kind of mistake, but the doctor's solemn expression told me otherwise. He explained that my spinal cord had been severely injured in the accident. Though there was a chance of recovery, it would be a long and grueling process. I clung to that sliver of hope with everything I had. Russell left the room shortly after, his expression unreadable. I was left alone, reeling from the enormity of what had just happened. The doctor gently encouraged me to rest, assuring me that my body needed time to heal. He promised that, with effort and patience, progress was possible. His words gave me something to hold on to, a fragile thread of hope amid the chaos. In the following hours, the nurses filled in the missing pieces of what had happened. I had been in a car accident, broadside at an intersection by a drunk driver. The impact had been severe, leaving me with a broken collarbone, facial bruises, and the most life-altering injury of all, damage to my spinal cord. The worst part, I had been in a coma for 2 weeks. I was still trying to absorb it all when I finally saw a familiar face, my mother. She had been by my side all along, and the moment she saw me awake, she rushed to my bedside, eyes brimming with emotion. The relief, the love, the worry, it was all there, plain as day. We cried together, our hands clasped tightly, unspoken words filling the space between us. But then came the question that had been gnawing at me since I first woke up: where was Russell? It turned out my mother had been wondering the same thing. She had tried reaching out to him, only to be met with excuses. She was furious, and rightfully so. While I had been unconscious, fighting for my life, Russell had been out with friends, barely visiting. The betrayal stung more than I could bear. When he finally did show up, he wasn't alone. Lori was with him. My stomach twisted at the sight of her, the very last person I wanted to see. My mother, sensing the tension, stepped out, leaving us to talk. I wasted no time. I asked Russell why he had been absent, but before he could answer, Lori spoke for him. Her words were venomous, cruelly dismissing my condition and insinuating that I was now a burden. And then she dropped the final blow. Russell had planned to stay with me, but she convinced him otherwise. She laid out her reasoning with no shame. My paralysis, my inability to contribute financially in the same way, I was now, in her eyes, worthless. I turned to Russell, praying for some sign that he disagreed, that he would stand up to his mother for once, but all he did was confirm it. In that moment, everything shattered. The love, the years, the promises, they all crumbled away. I had lost so much already, but this was the final betrayal. And yet, as broken as I was, something inside me stirred. A realization took root. I had survived the accident. I had fought my way back to consciousness, and now, I would fight for myself. Because if there was one thing I knew for certain, it was this: I deserved better. And I would find it. The betrayal hit me with a force I never expected, leaving me reeling in its wake. Lori made no effort to hide her belief that Russell deserved better, her words reducing my entire worth to my business success, a success now teetering on the edge of collapse. It was as if, without my achievements, I ceased to be a person of value. And Russell? He wasted no time in making his decision clear, announcing his intent to serve me with divorce papers. To add insult to injury, Lori wasted no time in setting him up on a date, as if I had already been erased from their lives. Their callousness was a revelation, a final, undeniable proof that their loyalty had never truly belonged to me. As they left, their departure felt like a door slamming shut on the life I had known. I sat there, hollowed out, struggling to process the enormity of what had just happened. The people I had trusted, the ones I had loved, had abandoned me in my moment of greatest need. But I wasn't left entirely alone. My mother returned home to find me in that shattered state, and though her presence couldn't undo the damage, it was a small comfort. When I told her what had transpired, fury ignited in her eyes, a fierce protectiveness that only a mother could possess. She hadn't been there to confront them, but she was there now, to hold me as I wept, to sit by my side until my body, exhausted by grief, succumbed to sleep. The next morning brought no reprieve. The divorce papers arrived, crisp and impersonal, a mere formality to end what I had once believed to be a loving marriage. I barely registered the act of signing them, but what lingered was the sight of Lori's smug triumph and Russell's apparent relief. It was a painful confirmation that I had been nothing more than a convenience, discarded the moment I became an inconvenience. The cruelty of it all, being abandoned at my lowest, was a wound deeper than any physical injury. The weeks that followed were a descent into darkness. Depression took hold of me, wrapping its suffocating tendrils around every aspect of my life. Days blurred into nights as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to summon the will to move. My world had lost its color, its meaning, but through it all, my mother remained my anchor. She never forced me to talk, never pushed too hard. Instead, she showed her love through quiet acts of care, bringing me my favorite meals, filling my room with fresh flowers, sitting beside me in silence when words failed. She was there, unwavering, even when I could barely acknowledge her presence. Time moved forward, indifferent to my suffering. Eventually, I was medically cleared to begin physical therapy, to start a regimen of medication aimed at managing my paralysis. My doctor recommended a skilled physical therapist, and appointments were scheduled for the following week. But I couldn't bring myself to care. The idea of struggling through therapy, of facing yet another battle, felt insurmountable. I let the days slip by, missing my first few sessions, sinking deeper into my sorrow. But my mother, as patient as she had been, had her limits. One afternoon, she stormed into my room, her voice firm, her frustration laid bare. She wasn't going to let me wallow any longer. She reminded me, in no uncertain terms, that while my circumstances were devastating, I still had a choice, to remain in this pit of despair or to fight for my future. She refused to accept my passivity, challenging me to take even the smallest step forward. Her words struck something deep within me. A spark of defiance flickered in the ashes of my grief. She was right. Russell and Lori had left me for dead, but I wasn't dead. My mind, my ambition, my very essence, none of it had been taken from me. If they believed I was finished, perhaps it was time to prove them wrong. With great reluctance, I agreed to start working from home. At first, it was just to appease my mother, to stop her relentless encouragement, but as I immersed myself in my business, something shifted. My business partner, my best friend, had kept things afloat in my absence, and she welcomed my return with open arms. Though she couldn't visit often, her presence, even through emails and phone calls, reminded me of the life I had once built and the one I could rebuild. Work became my first step toward healing. Slowly, I began attending my therapy sessions, pushing through the pain and embarrassment. The road was long, but I was moving forward, one determined step at a time. Then, an unexpected catalyst propelled me even further. One evening, scrolling through Facebook, I stumbled upon a post from Russell. He had remarried, and in true Russell fashion, the post was laced with a thinly veiled jab at our past. Rage, sharp and unyielding, surged through me. I wasn't just determined to recover anymore, I was determined to rise so high that neither he nor Lori could ever look down on me again. That moment ignited a fire within me. I poured myself into my recovery, dedicating the next 3 years to regaining my ability to walk. It was grueling, but I did it. I took those first unsteady steps with the aid of a cane. The next 5 years were devoted to my business, pushing it to unprecedented success. Awards, recognition, financial security, it all became mine, not out of revenge, but out of sheer, undeniable capability. Then, fate handed me an opportunity one never expected. Russell's company was failing. My company, thriving, was in a position to offer a merger, one that would grant us full control. The deal was finalized, and the moment I stepped into his company for the first post-merger meeting, cane in hand but standing tall, was one I would never forget. The shock on his face was a silent victory, a culmination of years of struggle and perseverance. Striding confidently into the boardroom, I let the sound of my heels echo in the stunned silence. I announced my new role as CEO and outlined the organizational restructuring, a restructuring that would, unsurprisingly, see Russell's tenure come to an end. His stunned disbelief, his frantic confrontation after the meeting, only solidified my resolve. He accused me of deception, of plotting revenge, but I dismissed his claims with the same indifference he once showed me. My success was never about him. His final plea, invoking his impending parenthood, did little to sway me. He had abandoned me at my lowest, and now, he was reaping the consequences. His termination letter had already been prepared, waiting for his signature. Lori's inevitable barrage of insults arrived later that day, but they carried no weight. I simply reminded her of her role in my downfall and left her to stew in her own bitterness. This wasn't about revenge, it was about resilience, about proving, not to them, but to myself, that I was stronger than they ever believed. From the depths of despair, the only direction left is upward, and I had never felt so powerful.